this evening. We're live.
I'm not hanging off anyone's looking. Let's do some snacks and hang snacks first. Snacks plus hang snacks.
Oh, I just got a little. It's got a little notification there.
Oh, turn off that reader.
How do I like this?
Why does it give me? You can create clips on live streams even if you're not running the live stream.
No way.
That
makes no sense.
Well, you can like share the clip.
That's on normal videos now too, though.
Is it fun?
Yeah. Poseidon's asking, can we have David Gray on our podcast? Are you meaning the...
I don't think he means the David.
The 90s musician.
That's David G-R-A-Y, though. I don't think David Gray meant he's David G-R-E-Y.
Who was he talking to?
He said David G-R-E-Y. You'll have to be more specific, Poseidon. Yeah. There's David Gray Rehab.
Okay, we'll give it a few more minutes until everyone kind of tunes in. Get your questions in. Please like this. And if you can send it to your closest friends and get them to watch it as well, that would be great.
It's great to see people ragging on physios lately, though, is a good thing, you know.
See,
it's great to see.
So big.
I'm all for it.
Poseidon says he's a PT that's better than Squat University. To be honest, I've met and dealt with a lot of physios, a lot of them, and very few people have a better understanding than Aaron Harshig. I'm gonna say, have to have a look at David Gray.
I've mostly met not good
terrible physios.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the vast majority of physios I've met have not been good.
Yeah. And in terms of physios who actually make a difference to the population of athletes as a whole, I think Aaron is up there with top 3 or 4 people in realms of mobility, flexibility, and general rehab work. Aaron is way up there, you know.
All around just nice guy.
Yeah, and great information, really well delivered. We'll have to have a look at David Gray.
Is he Irish?
I don't know.
David Gray. Maybe Poseidon is David Gray. And he's
you
should have on the podcast.
Yeah, he's way better.
It's like when the magicians ask for a volunteer from the audience.
Yeah.
And they're like,
it's the girl already wearing the glitzy dress.
Unassuming madame. Can I have you up here? And she's like, me?
Me?
Come on.
Never
there.
Me.
He's eating Big Macs, so that's not a bad start. Oh, it's not his. Is it not his video? That's not his video.
There it is.
He looks kind of Irish, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Big Irish head up.
Listen to the accent.
70, 80, whatever degrees of deflection, I try and get further and actually...
Yeah, he's definitely Irish.
He's Irish, yeah.
Oh, he's Irish, all right.
Yeah.
And his name on YouTube is Poseidon. We'll certainly have a look. Okay, let's get into some of these questions. Thoughts on strongman style sandbag training, picks and carries for grappling and jiu-jitsu? This is Aluduasawin 93. To be perfectly honest, Joe, have you ever watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Oh, have I watched?
Where they're training Rosa to go on the standing court, and it's like, to be perfectly candid.
No,
where she says that before each one.
Oh,
very funny. To be perfectly candid, sandbag stuff, strongman stuff, weird implement stuff is useful, but it's not as useful as just being strong. So I think if you have the double bodyweight squat and 2.5 times bodyweight deadlift and the bodyweight strict press, then by all means go and use the weird implements, go and use the sandbags, go and use the Atlas stones. But in cases outside of that, right, where you haven't really focused on your strength training, focused on your power training, using the normal means through which we all achieve much better numbers, then I would stay away from him. Like, it's not going to be bad, but it won't be your fastest route to success.
Elliot Hooker saying wins a full board training camp in Sikistan. I don't see there ever being a full board training camp. I just don't see us having the opportunity to ever do that.
If one of us won the lotto and we bought like a hotel in the mountains,
Maybe
where you just hold, but aside from that, I don't think it'll happen.
That's not really a thing outside of Eastern Europe. The full board stuff, like you just don't really see that. I know Tarokity does it, but it's still paid for, you know. You still pay well for that full board stuff, so it kind of just ends up costing the same anyway. We will be having another shorter camp in the summer. It'll be a 2-day camp, so we'll be doing kind of 4 sessions and 2 lectures over the course of 2 days. The people who did the training camp fucking loved it, which was great.
Yeah, really good group.
So we're hoping to have a 2-day one again in Ascension in south of London. So apparently it's not London. It's London to us though. So 2 days with a certain someone. So there's yet to be confirmed. The dates are looking at the end of June or very, very early July. It'll be a 2-day thing, just weekend, a Saturday and a Sunday. And it'll be a good lot. We'll get a lot packed into 2 days, and there'll be availability for more numbers for that one. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be announcing that very soon if it's going to go ahead. Just need to confirm with the other individual, but I'm pretty sure he will be all up for it.
All up for it.
Yeah, and that'll be a great one. I'm really happy at how the camp went. I'm so happy how it went.
Yeah. Our throwing friend says, "You'll never guess what I'm doing at the moment." Ha 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 ha. I'd love to know what he is doing at the moment. He says, "Cheers for your help yesterday, Garth."
I'm going to say warming up for throwing. Someone in the group was asking how would they get into throwing.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, well, there's one person we can know it could help them.
Yeah.
I'm sure Andrew could help them with their throwing. It's weird you see adults wanting to get into throwing.
Yeah. It's not a sport you think of taking up later in life.
No.
Samir Clarkson says, any experience with Atlas stones? How do you recommend warming up? Stones seem to aggravate elbow tendonitis. I'm going to say this about stones in the same way where I'll say about it with any heavy, weird implement carry. A lot of people just aren't strong enough for those kinds of implements. And I've seen this hundreds and hundreds of times.
Well, I think he's talking about actually doing strongman, I would assume.
Okay. But even in that case,
yeah,
just being very, very strong will help with not aggravating your elbows. In terms of warming up, doing things like RDLs, bent over rows, front squats, all of those things will help. And then ideally having stones or sandbags or equally weird and obnoxiously strange objects to carry will help you warm up for Atlas stones. I think strict muscle cleans, if you're doing the stone onto the block, that will definitely help. But yeah, my general thing about Atlas stones is my general thing about a lot of the strongman stuff is like those implants are very strange and people get the weird elbow tendonitis. They'll get golfer's elbow or tennis elbow because their general strength just might not be there yet to do it. They'll be able to do one or two of the movements. They'll be able to achieve them and kind of get reps in, but they're probably not strong enough for those yet. So
the strongmen that I coach just literally have them warm up with lighter stones and work their way up after a good general warm up. That's the main thing, is just lighter sets and reps like you would with a barbell or whatever, and just go up in the implements as if whether it's ground to shoulder or ground to over the bar, whatever, that's what they do. In terms of the elbow tendonitis, generally elbow tendonitis coming to forearm or the bicep, so I'd be looking at soft tissue work there. A lot of people have like hypertonicity at that insertion point at the bottom of your bicep, so it may be worth looking out at that and definitely putting a bit of like physical or manual therapy through that. Maybe a little bit of contrast work as well on that, see if it helps out a little bit. So that's the main thing there, just a general warm up with lighter weights and progress through them, just like you would with any kind of training. That's the main thing with those. There's no kind of special warm up, or there's no secret technique that I'm aware of that anyone kind of does with warm up for stones. Just the main thing I find with strongman training is you have to really limit the amount of strongman training you're doing. And at certain points of the year, you don't do any strongman implement training. So you would just do your general S and C work throughout the year. And then when you get to a certain distance out from competition, you add in your strongman work. The problem with strongman work is you can basically only do it once a week. And then even at that, you have to be quite smart with it. High frequency strongman work is a recipe for injury. It's just due to the nature of it. It's very, very difficult. Even for the lads who are on heaps of gear, it's still very, very difficult for them to not get injured. You see how much they get injured. So you've got to be really smart and intelligent with your loading for strongman training. It's definitely a very important part of that. It's the most important part of strongman stuff is the appropriate loading of your sport-specific work.
Okay, John Seller asks, thoughts on the French contrast method? I know you said that heavy lifting and fatiguing yourself before flyouts is counterproductive, but some people seem to be swearing by it. So the French contrast method, from my vague and brief reading of it, seems to be the use of post-activation potentiation, doing a rep or two at quite heavy percentages. Then in a condensed rest period, you go and you do your plyometric work. That would certainly work, right? So you're using post-activation potentiation to artificially increase your productivity or artificially increase your abilities in plyometric movements. So an example of this would be squatting 80% of your 1RM for a single. Then within 15 seconds to 3 minutes, you would go and you would do max vertical jumps, right? So this works through a series of neuromuscular activations in the squat, which then when we transfer over to the jump, we're primed, as it were, for the jump. This also works because a single rep at a relatively high percentage of your 1RM isn't fatiguing. It's not going to produce a whole load of metabolic byproducts. It's not going to produce a load of lactic acid. It's not going to deplete a lot of glycogen. And also your plyometric work isn't necessarily a capacity event. It's just 1 or 2 attempts or 3 or 4 attempts at a certain thing. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. That's the theory behind that. Are there issues with it? Yes. So the use of post-activation potentiation would be the same way where we mightn't always want to use banded assisted jumps, which would get us a similar kind of outcome. Where we're jumping faster because we have assistance from a band, or we have assistance of a sprung floor, we have something along those lines. These are the kind of issues you're coming across. Do we necessarily want to be training using PAP all the time? No, we don't want to be training using assistance all the time. In the same way where sprint training down a slight hill will be very, very beneficial for our top end speed. Do we want to do it all the time? No. It's the same way. It'll be useful at certain times of the year. It won't be useful at other times of the year. So that's what I would say on the French contrast method. It could certainly have its uses at times, but don't get caught up in the fact that you think you're pre-fatiguing yourself or you're doing anything other than some kind of very, very basic post-activation potentiation work, which will allow you to jump higher, jump further, rebound faster and harder. Andrew's officially opening his season on Sunday, so best of luck with that.
Okay, athletics kind of only goes during the summer, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, outdoor. Yeah, some indoor leagues and stuff run through the winter, but I'd love to know how you get on.
Collie Blue says, how decide which foot goes forward in the split jerk? So ask someone who you know who sees you a lot to push you gently from behind when you're not expecting it and see which foot goes forward. And that is generally the one that is the one goes forward. You can just practice with both feet and see which feels better and which looks better. So see if you can get someone kind of more experienced to have a look at your split jerk and see which looks better. But in general, it's rare. I've never really seen anyone pick the wrong foot for split jerk. In general, the one that goes forward and the first day one or whatever you're practicing split jerk is one of the it's usually the one you'll end up using.
Usually a coach will be able to spot it from around 3 miles away. It will just look wrong. Like you'll notice it immediately. When I started doing split jerks first, I think I split jerked for around 1.5 years with my incorrect foot forward until somebody caught me and got me to put my other leg forward. It was way better. Yeah. Poddy.
How are you splitting with the wrong leg?
Just went right foot forward. What I will say with field sports athletes, if you're used to grabbing a ball and kicking a ball from your hands, the leg you don't kick with will usually be the forward leg, because you're used to placing that and planting that with a lot of stability. That's been my experience with a load of athletes, is that if you kick a ball with your right foot and you're used to a big kick off your right, you'll have a lot of stability built up in the left leg. And then that left leg is better served going forward. But it really is, it's worth doing the drop test. It's worth doing the push test just to see.
Justin Gomez is saying, how do you increase ankle dorsiflexion? If so, how? So the main things with any kind of mobility that we're always talking about is tension, frequency, and the force you put behind your stretching. So you need to do something frequently enough to have a consistent effect on it, whereby you'll remind your body to kind of reinforce this new position. So you need to do it frequently enough that you make that new position default or something you can get to easier. You need to do it for long enough that the stretch actually has a meaningful effect. For example, if you stretch it for 2 seconds, it's obviously not going to have any meaningful effect. If you stretch it for 30 seconds, you're going to have more of a meaningful effect. And then you want the force you put behind it. So there's a correct amount of force. This isn't the maximum amount of force you need to put into the squat. You need to put the appropriate amount of force into a stretch to give you the desired response. So for ankle work in general, you like to see daily or multiple times a day, depending how bad your ankle mobility is. You need to have a pretty reasonable amount of force going through that ankle. And then you need to do it in general for ankles. You want to see it like at least 20 to 30 seconds, if not a little bit longer, depending on the stretches you're doing. You need to stretch your ankle in a both fully extended leg position and then a fully flexed knee position. So at the bottom of a squat and standing straight. So stretching your ankle with for example, elevating your toe and then leaning forward into it. So pulling your body weight forward, keep your knee straight and elevating your toe. And then the other one then is in the full depth squat position. So you're stretching your soleus and your gastrocnemius and stuff, and you're at the bottom of the squat, and then you're reaching your knee as far over your toe as much as possible. This might be in a bipedal squat, or this might be in a split squat, and you're getting your knees as far over your knee as much as possible. And this is one of the best ways. A lot of times people will only do one or the other, but both of those are quite important for the increasing of your ankle mobility.
Big thing with ankle mobility is if you never do any sprinting, bounding, jumping, or like plyo work, it tends to be a lot better. So if you do have that in your program, it can really tighten up, particularly skipping really tightens up ankles. Sahil Gupta says, sometimes I miss snatch PR attempts I can totally make because I subconsciously let my nerves mess up my technique. How do I get over this? So first thing I'm going to say is clerking lifts, missing weights because like you don't pull under it or you subconsciously stop yourself being able to do it, is not necessarily a psychological thing. And a lot of times you have rate limiting factors within your muscle. You also have rate limiting factors within your peripheral nervous system and central nervous system that will stop you doing certain things if your body deems you not to be able to do it. So sometimes people say, oh, I keep clerking an 80 kilo snatch. It keeps dropping out in front of me, or I keep getting soft elbows when I try and jerk it. A lot of the time, that's the subconscious system in your body, in the same way where if you tried to sprint directly into a wall, you wouldn't be able to sprint directly into a wall and your hands would come up, or you'd stop and repel away from it. A lot of those things are subconscious limiting factors because your body doesn't think it's possible for you to do it right now. In those cases, building momentum in training, being very consistent, hitting singles, doubles, and triples up until very, very close weights or very close to your 1 rep max, building consistency over the amount of singles, doubles, and triples you're hitting close to those weights every week, and then making sure you're very consistent and never missing weights at those kind of 90 and 95%. You will not have this issue if you're hitting 90% for 20 singles every week for 3 weeks, and then you go up to hit the single. Most of the time we see this, it's people who aren't, in inverted commas, kind of earning the right to go heavy. They're not doing enough volume in their initial phase of training. They're not then doing enough kind of close to maximal attempts where they're not failing any weights for kind of 4 weeks before they attempt the max. And then when they do go to attempt the max, it's like they've done a week of triples, a week of doubles, a week of singles, and then they go to hit a max and expect that max to be higher. You need to do kind of 3 months of preparation, then a month of those heavier attempts and singles where there is 0 misses, and then you go for a new max. A lot of time you're just putting the cart before the horse and not building up necessary momentum.
Liam Cunningham is saying, do you have to become proficient in the Olympic movements before the combat strength program? So it'd be good if you had some experience with the power clean. So the last 4 weeks, there's power cleans in the program. You don't have to be very proficient with these. It would help a lot if you're proficient. Obviously, the more proficient you are, but they're quite light. They're designed there for a lot of speed and some power production. So it would ideally, if you had a little bit of experience of those, it would be very, very useful. But it's by no means integral to the program. It's just the power cleans. Everything else you should be able to do with any general strength training background. So if you've done powerlifting up to now, you're perfectly fine for the combat sports program. Just the power clean is the only thing you'll need to pay attention to. But for those 4 weeks, you should be able to work on it and get some of the benefits from just learning them at all, even if you've done none of them. So they're very, very light. Again, they're not an integral part of the program. They're just useful in there, but you don't have to be proficient at like the full snatch or the full clean or jerk or anything like that.
Ali Dewis, when 93 says he does have a double body weight squat. Nice. So 500 pound plus deadlift, 300 pound bench. So mostly use sandbags for conditioning. Absolutely 200 pound you're 200 pounds and you use 200 pound for 5-minute intervals. Yeah, be great in that case. Really, really good. They're quite awkward. You're having to use a lot of different muscles to control them. They're quite fatiguing on your system. So by all means, that's a great application in that case.
Fun stuff saying did not have good results at all from your squat program.
Send us an email.
Yeah,
absolutely. Send us an email. We'll have a chat through it. We'll see what you're doing. Might have some little bits of minutiae that you might need to change around that, just in terms of your own kind of situation and where you are at in your training. So by all means, pop us over an email and we'll have a chat.
A lot of times you'll see people, they'll do stuff like they might have said, I can do 120 for 3, so my max is 140, even though they've never done more than 120 for 3, for example. And then they'll put in 140 in the max, and they'll be unable to do the working sets because they put in a 1RM that they're not necessarily able to do. Sometimes you see people do things like they'll hit 150 a year ago and they haven't come close to it since. And in the meantime, they've lost like 50 kilos or like 15 kilos body weight or something. And then they'll try that 150 max again. But in reality, their current max is only somewhere in the region of like 130, for example, or something like that. So there's just sometimes people make some errors in their judgment when they're putting stuff into the program. That's very important to be aware of. Always make sure to use a max that you're doing now, and that you're giving the program the priority for those 8 weeks if you're deciding to do the squat program.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very, very rare somebody doesn't make somewhere between 10 and 20% on their 1RM.
Yeah.
Very, incredibly rare. And there's been a couple of thousand people run that program, so it's very rare. Just do send us an email. We'll have a chat. Shay Downing has a very good question. So just deadlifted 215 kilos for reps.
Jesus Christ.
I've only been training high reps on deadlifts since the first lockdown started. Any advice on transfer my rep into a 1RM? First piece of advice I would say is go very, very slowly and be careful. A lot of time people will transfer over from a high volume period of training, and they'll go way too aggressive and way too steep with that line of progression. If you're at 12s now, you're probably looking at 10 to 12 weeks going from 12 to singles or doubles even, just start 215 for 12. Next week it might be 10s. You might do 2 or 3 weeks of 10s, 2 or 3 weeks of 8s, 2 or 3 weeks of 6s, 4s, 2s and 1s, or 5s, 3s and 1s. Take your time, go very, very slowly. You'll also need to change your setup. A lot of time people are very good at reps, won't quite have that kind of level of aggression and that level of tightness in the first rep because they're used to just getting the first rep moving off the floor. For you, 215 kilos is quite light, so when you get to the heavier weights, you'll really have to be good at that isometric strength of squeezing into a good position. Even if you have a dynamic start, you'll need to be able to recruit all that muscle in 2 seconds or less. So you really do need to focus on your start position and focus on that start. But yeah, take your time and go slowly might be my advice.
215 for 12. I would have to say would be a 300 kilo deadlift.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone with less than 300 kilos could do 215 for a number of repetitions like that. For double digit reps, maybe like 290ish, maybe 285. But if you're really good with arms, I'd have to imagine that's a 300 kilo deadlift. I couldn't see that being any less.
Stephen Ward says, hot take, cheetah rows are far less beneficial for athletes not on PEDs relative to alternative exercises. I just don't agree with this.
What would be the alternative
What would be
exercise?
the alternative? People think, like, I'm not going to get into the reasons on this. This is just not true. I've been prescribing rows, strict rows, inverted rows, upright rows, fully bent over rows, pendlay rows with a pause, cheetah rows, single arm cheetah rows for years. And I've been doing them myself for 15 years on a very regular basis. A cheetah row just has an application that almost any other exercise doesn't hit, and in terms of maintaining upper back posture, in terms of maintaining scapula flat on your back. I think a lot of time people misuse the cheetah row and people aren't strong enough to maintain that bent over position and maintain good upper back posture. They'll end up sacrificing upper back posture rather than scapular position on their back, They're very, very different things. You need a certain level of experience to achieve what you need to achieve with a cheetah row. But the use of PEDs versus non-use of PEDs is almost negligible in this case. People think the use of androgens or the use of anabolics will immediately make your upper back really strong and really tight, or they'll get this thing where, rounded off deltoids and big traps immediately mean that you're on gear, because gear somehow singles those out immediately as the only area of progression. It's really not true. Puzzler says it helps to build explosive strength, assuming you mean cheetah row are throwing the weight up and not controlling it on the eccentric. The main thing for a cheetah row for me is that you get that scapular movement in the shoulder, and then you're pulling the scap back to a good position and you're rolling up,
Lee is saying, what drills would you recommend to correct internal rotation of the front foot in the jerk? So first of all, it'll be just correct repetitions of the jerk placement or the foot placement in the split jerk. So there's hundreds, thousands of repetitions with a good foot position and not doing weights where you have excessive internal rotation of your foot and reinforcing that good foot position in the split jerk. Another thing you can do is look at your adductors and abductors and see if you have full range of motion and adequate strength in those. So have you adequate external internal rotation in the split jerk? So especially in the tightness there. So if you have a lot of maybe if you've like glute med, there's a lot of tension up there, a lot of tightness, you might have issue externally rotating your knee. So that might be an issue there where you're forcing yourself when you split your forward that your front foot is kind of turning in. There might also be kind of tightness down in the adduct region, so your groin, and it's worth having a look at those as well. Rack bicep curls. Said he fucked up his arm this week. Yes, do zombie squats.
Oh shit.
Oh dear.
Oh dearie me. Was it doing a Zercher squat?
Besides saying you try so much squat you was wrong about. I used to follow everything he said and bought his books and watched all these videos, but nothing he gave me helped. That's that
doesn't necessarily mean, like, we deal with loads of physios. We deal with loads of athletes who are with physios. We deal with them in our own cases, and you just see what tends to work well for a lot of people. And like, we don't agree with everything he says. We don't agree with everything anyone says. We don't agree with everything each other say about certain things. Like, I wouldn't agree with his thing on wrist positions in the overhead. It's just the nature of my experience being different from his experience, and it's not necessary that because somebody says one or two things that you don't agree with that can't be beneficial for you or other people. It's not necessarily a binary thing of Boolean yes, no. If somebody's information is good or not. A lot of the time you just have to look at what these people do in the broad sense. Like, are they bringing good information to a massive amount of people? Yes. Do I tend to recommend what they say to a lot of people? Yes. Do we coach a lot of people who need help with all of the stuff he talks about? Yeah. And then do we have personal experience where Garth has actually been treated by him for multiple different issues, where Garth has sought help from a lot of different people in a lot of different spheres of kind of physiotherapy, physical therapy, and normal medical advice, and they haven't helped, and he's been able to help. So that's why kind of I do stand up for Aaron. He's a lot of very good information that's accessible to everyone, and it's almost all accessible for free if you're willing to go through all of the information he has out there online. You don't necessarily need to buy the books or go behind the paywall to find it, which a lot of the rehab stuff you have to do.
As well, there's a possibility now you could have been doing this right, but you could have been applying the information incorrectly. So you could have been not applying it correctly for your rehab, or it may not have been specific enough for your needs. So you may have been doing something that wasn't specifically for your rehab. But obviously, we don't know. We can't say without seeing your case in specific, so it's impossible to say. I just do know that, Scott University's put out a lot of stuff that has been incredibly helpful, He gets a lot of slack lately, and I don't really know why, to be honest. I don't.
Do you know what? Anytime I've seen him getting slack, and I see the people who are commenting giving him slack, like I've seen one or two people who I'm like, oh yeah, they're kind of stronger. They're kind of in a good position in their particular sphere of sport, and they might know what's going on, and they don't agree with one or two things he says. And then you see the slack he gets in like other videos where people are commenting underneath the videos, and it's just never people who are right up there, in my experience of seeing those comments under the videos. I don't.
Yeah.
Not saying that about anyone here, but I'm always conscious of that.
So you saying a lot of PRI? I don't know. PRIs.
What I understand of PRI is postural restoration, but you could mean a different thing here. Breathing and gait cycle stuff with breathing literature, and I know this from looking into breathing literature myself. Breathing is not an area we're currently way up there on. Breathing is not like something akin to training hypertrophy, or it's not something that's very well studied like ACL rehab. Breathing is something people are constantly coming up with new theories about breathing, how we should be breathing. It's definitely in the last 20 years, the research on breathing has changed a lot. So I wouldn't, by any means, buy into one person's thoughts on breathing. It's definitely something that's quite fluid at the moment. And particularly breathing in athletic realms, breathing for training, or the alteration of breathing patterns while training is something that's changing massively. So I wouldn't be buying into that. Like if you were looking at breathing research from 2008 to 2010, you would be thinking the use of constrictive equipment to restrict your air intake will be a great thing. And then if you looked at that research from 2012 to 2015, you would see that the restriction of breathing with an implement is a very negative thing in training, So those kind of areas where you have a lot of flux and you have a lot of different information coming in the whole time, these things are by no means it's more like foreign or current affairs news cycles, like they change. We have stuff coming out all the time. So particularly on areas like that, I wouldn't be hinging my opinions of someone.
Yeah, but if it's working, what's wrong with it?
Exactly, yeah.
What do you think so?
So he's saying he doesn't agree with his thoughts on breathing.
Yeah, but he said the breathing gait cycle is working.
Oh, it's helping. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Right.
I thought it was the opposite way around. That's the stuff he didn't agree with.
Okay, no. He said this.
Yeah.
Helping. Zerchers, yeah or nah? I've seen a lot of people do them or talk about them recently. Maybe it's just Zach talking about them in his videos. We never give Zerchers to anyone Zercher squats or the Zercher lift, I suppose. I think there's just too much a chance for bicep issues or an injury to happen, like an acute training injury where you injure something in the moment, but it happens immediately. That wasn't an issue prior to that. I'm not seeing a load of benefits to Zerchers. I just don't. I think the risk to reward on Zerchers is too much compared to other exercises, I would think.
Enoch Crosby says 3x8 squats on the 2-minute rest for getting back into lifting after a couple of months off. Definitely time restricted training can help with your capacity a lot. Just doing every minute on the minute stuff, every 2 minutes on the 2-minute stuff can help. 3x8 probably wouldn't be the rep system I'd go for there. If I was doing defined rest periods for squats in order to increase my work capacity, I'd be doing something like 10 sets of 6 or 10 sets of 4, you know, just to prolong that, make sure you're in that aerobically compromised environment for a small bit longer, just trying to get those better outcomes in terms of your capacity.
I like to, when getting back into training after a period of time off, I like to go in a lot more softly and allow things to recalibrate after a while and reacclimatize stuff. So you come in nice and easy. So you do moderate sets and reps, plenty of rest time between sets and reps, or between sets. The weights are very, very light, and you do that for a reasonable period of time. And then you can go into the high volume stuff and the high GPP stuff and the short rest times and high volume. Definitely you can do it after a while, but I like the first few weeks to be nice and easy, because if you go in too hard and too fast too soon, you'll end up potentially damaging yourself somehow or compromising your technique and relearning the process of that stuff. So I like the high volume, low rest stuff is great with short rest times, but I like to, if you're coming after a break, I like to come in very, very softly at the start. So nice and easy sets and reps, plenty of rest time between those, feel out the movement again, see what's hurting, see what's tight, and see if there's any issues there, and then kind of get into your GPP phase. You know, give it like 4 weeks or so before you start going crazy with the high volume stuff. And I found that like a safer method. The volume initially will work, but I found that things start hurting a lot more if you don't give them a chance initially and see what's what, see what kind of state your body's in, see what your mobility is like, see what your strengths and weaknesses are currently.
Someone says, "What's up, y'all pumper goblins?"
Is that a reference to something?
I have no idea. Puzzled says, right, squatting ass to grass or parallel is better, ? I converted to ass to grass, Clarence Kennedy depth, and the squats feel more difficult, but more consistent because of not pausing. Should I continue? My numbers are going up. You say that you squat in socks only for the ass to grass squats. Should you buy proper weightlifting shoes? Ass to grass full depth squats, assuming your technique is perfect, are going to be a better training tool. Whether you're a weightlifter, rugby player, whether you're anything really, if you can squat ass to grass with good tension throughout, good positions throughout, they're going to be better. Now, could you squat a bit more weight if you're just going to parallel? Maybe. But the fact that you get a stretch shortening cycle happening in the bottom of the squat, you'll probably get a better outcome from ass to grass in terms of pushing your top end stuff as well. For buying weightlifting shoes, I certainly would buy weightlifting shoes, even if you're able to do an ass to grass squat in bare feet. You could just get a weightlifting shoe with a slightly lower heel. It will offer you some better support. It will also make you a lot more stable in the bottom position. Just having that small bit of a raise will help you get your quads engaged a bit more and your knees pushed further forward. The other thing it will do is, like, a lot of the time, if we just have our foot pressing on like the timber of a platform or a rubber floor that's quite hard, you'll get some neuromuscular inhibition coming from that hard surface pressing onto the bone in your heel or the ball of your foot or whatever, and just the insole in your shoe can help with that a small bit. So I think squatting in shoes is better. Just make sure you don't go over the top and get a big like high lift in your heel if you don't need it.
Also check out the Flexible Bill Hartman and Connor Harris. I saw something really good on Instagram recently. It was something, the body unit. He did a lot of very interesting mobility stuff.
Okay.
That I found quite useful. It was, I'll tell you now, actually. I think he's German. Body unit. Is it? Really, really good stuff, actually. I was doing some, that's where I saw the rotation on the kettlebells.
Okay.
Really good stuff.
There's so many more people here now.
Jeez, it's crazy. It used to be Kelly Starrett.
It used to just be Kelly Starrett. And there was an English guy who did a lot of Kelly Starrett stuff. I cannot remember his name.
Was he the fella stealing all the stuff? No.
Apparently Kelly was stealing a load of it from him.
Oh, he's stealing a load of foam roller stuff from him.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. Keith Graham used to be big into his stuff. That English guy had some really good stuff, like a lot of the banded distraction stuff, a lot of the myofascial release stuff.
This fella, will that focus on that actually? He is so fucking good for mobility stuff. He's called Jan Schwaderer. It's Jan Functional Body Unit on Instagram. He's really good mobility stuff. I was trying a lot of it, and I was really enjoying it. I like the stuff he talks about. So he's worth a look for mobility. Quite small, like 40,000 followers on Instagram. So there's loads of those guys out there.
Yeah.
And it's good because a lot of them have their different flavors. It's like strength coaches and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
You learn different stuff from them. Should I buy proper weightlifting shoes? Yes.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone yet who I didn't think would benefit from weightlifting shoes. And then, you know, they're like, oh, I don't know. And then they get them and they're like, oh my God, how was I ever squatting without weightlifting shoes?
Yeah. Poseidon has a good question. If you were new to weightlifting and wanted to push technical proficiency while pushing strength and size, how would you design a program? If I was new to weightlifting and I wanted to get better at weightlifting and get stronger, I do the Secret Strength Beginner program. And this sounds like I'm trying to shill a program. I'm really not. It's really what we would recommend for it. In terms of adding strength and size, I probably wouldn't add any additional strength work to the stuff you're already doing on that program. But if you wanted to get a bit bigger, just make sure you're in a calorie surplus. You might also want to do some additional accessory work, because the beginner program is very, very specifically for the lifts and getting stronger for the lifts. But that's where I do 4 days a week of the 12-week beginner program. I would do some upper body and lower body bodybuilding while I was doing it, and you would be set. I'd run that twice or 3 times and you'll be good to go.
So the thing with multiple different goals in that is that it's not that strength and size are at odds with technical proficiency. It's just that if you're trying to increase your strength and size, it's a lot of your resources being shuttled away from your ability to adapt to a new sport. So there's kind of there's this term, a Hungarian sports scientist termed in the last century, he called it adaptation energies, and the energies that you have available to adapt to your specific kind of training. And so starting a new sport like weightlifting while trying to improve other things is incredibly different, because weightlifting is such high skills. It's very, very fatiguing, and it requires a lot of thought process and a lot of time spent in the gym. And the strength and size stuff requires a lot of time spent in the gym, but also requires a lot of calories, a lot of sleep, and a lot of direction towards that, and a lot of volume in those trainings. So it's very, very hard for you to really dedicate yourself to both of those. For example, when I started jiu-jitsu, I was basically doing no weightlifting. And I know those first 3 months, if I was trying to do any kind of weightlifting, it would have been terrible for my weightlifting, you know. And it's just that kind of goal thing. And that's why there's a lot of block periodization, or kind of block periodization mixed a little bit with concurrent training. So some refresher stuff of their skills, but their primary goal is other aspects. So I would say it would be very hard for you to push weightlifting while trying to get bigger and stronger. The only scenario I could see where it'd be quite easy for you is if you're learning weightlifting, but if you'd been previously very big and very strong and you're trying to get back into the big and strong size while learning weightlifting, it would be possible for you, because it'd be a lot easier for you to return to good condition.
We pick a few questions.
Yeah.
So Len Ken asks, are fit squats in the last vlog specific, so box squats specific to BJJ related strength goals, or just for a change? They're just specific to BJJ. So I want to get to like 250 for a few triples to a box. The box is like bang on parallel for me, or roughly around there. That will be pretty much as strong as I'll ever need to be for BJJ. The reason they're there is it's a much easier way for me to get that top end number in. The full depth squats, or my usual squats, would just take a bit more out of me for training. This is kind of running into my next question that I've picked out, is that this will allow me to do jiu-jitsu training, some squatting, and start running again without having to put all those adaptation energies that Gerf talked about into just the squat. If I was to really chase squat numbers or push my squat a lot more, it would certainly have more of an impact on me trying to run more and train in the jiu-jitsu gym on the mats a bit more. So box squats are a very easy way for me just to achieve a very heavy squat number for some reps while losing a bit of weight and doing all the other training. Adam Stevenson says, do you have any plans to release any running programs such as a 5-minute mile or sprinting or vertical box jumps? Sika Hops will certainly be coming out, the Sika Jump program. It's down the list slightly from a couple of other programs that are coming out as well. So we're just we don't just write a program and kind of throw it out. It takes a long time for us to write the program. We then test programs with different people and make sure those progressions are ample and sufficient. So it's in the pipeline, but there's other things ahead of it right now.
Aris is asking, will things like amphetamines or other similar drugs help with physical skill learning, like to do for mental learning for someone with or without ADD, just in general? So they will definitely not help with physical skill learning. So there is good evidence that amphetamine and amphetamine derivative drugs like modafinil or Adderall reduce brain Jesus Christ, have I been taking them? Reduces brain plasticity even after one use. So in those cases, I would say that's almost certainly detrimental for your ability to learn. So for people with ADD, these medications are beneficial because they're bringing them up from a deficit, not above normal. So in this scenario, if you had without ADD and use these medications, you almost certainly will have less physical skill learning abilities. I would imagine you'd learn things worse on average. The mental learning thing, it's interesting. The Adderall thing is supposedly you feel more productive, but you're actually not in any way more productive. Now, I know some people swear by the productivity of Adderall from studying, but I don't know if that's ever been verified in larger scale studies in terms of memory tests and cognitive tests. So I definitely wouldn't be dabbling with those things. It's something like 40% of US students are on some kind of amphetamine derivative studying, which I think is fucking ludicrous.
Mental. Yeah. I just wouldn't. Amphetamines generally for training, I would just stay so far away from. You really don't want nor need them for most training. As Broderick kind of says, if you need some kind of thing to get you to go to training, you're probably in the wrong gig, you know. It's obviously if you want to learn something faster, and there are compounds which will help you learn faster and improve that neuroplasticity, and there's certain things that will help with verbal recall and physical literacy, but amphetamines would really stay away from that plasticity. Don't stay around too easy. You don't want to chase it off.
Michael P is saying, are gymnasts really jacked because they're the modality of training, or does the sport select for people with jacked physiques? I think it definitely selects for people with more propensity for muscular endurance and muscular volume and imagine, and more upper body muscles. It's also to do with the large amount of heads they're probably using, and definitely to the massive amount of volume they're doing daily in their gymnastics training. So they've got the training volume, they've got the genetics, and they've got the drugs. So they got that trifecta.
The other thing they have is, and you'll see this with the jiu-jitsu people as well, is like anytime weight becomes negative in your sport, you're going to see really low body fat percentages. So obviously with gymnasts, they're not within a weight class, but if you're hanging from a ring or if you're doing work on the parallel bars, any additional kilos are going to be more, or they'll make your job more difficult. So then you see people who are very ripped. So somebody who's incredibly ripped as a 70 kilo athlete will look like they're much more jacked than an 80 kilo athlete who's not in great shape. So it's just something to keep in mind of, like, when you see these people, you have to think like, okay, are we just seeing more jacked people, or are they actually gaining more muscle or building more muscle? The other thing is a lot of times you won't be too blown away by their leg structure. So a lot of that adaptation energy will go into upper body hypertrophy.
What's RPR?
I don't know.
RPR.
Relative percentage. Declan O'Sullivan asks, any coupons for the programs? There's no discount codes. There's a sale once a year on Black Friday.
Rapid plasmarine, a screening test for syphilis. Is that what you mean? I don't think that's what he means.
Don't think that's what
Christian,
he means.
I don't think that's what you mean.
I hope that's not what you mean.
I would love to see training video analysis on sumo lifters. Maze is saying thoughts on velocity-based strength for strength and power training. So I definitely think velocity-based training could be a good idea if you use it. But what I would bet was that if you had an experienced coach and you laid out programs that have worked successfully for people before, I bet you they would line up with results that you'd expect if you're looking for specific meters per second speeds on a velocity-based program, I would bet by and large they would overlap nicely. I bet they'd be like this little Venn diagram. And I bet that on good strength and power programs, you would see that overlap. So for strength, the velocity stuff isn't really relevant. You don't really need the velocity-based stuff for pure force training. For powerlifting and stuff, that velocity-based stuff just isn't really necessary. It's nice to see, and it's nice to have a record of it, and details are always great, but it's not really useful. For power training, it would definitely be very useful if you could get some kind of barometric. But a good rule of thumb, to be honest, if the bar is moving so slow that you need to start recording it and see if it goes over the threshold, it's probably too heavy anyway, and you don't really need to be recording it. And it might sound, like you're being super like, you know what I get all my guys to do? Just loads of curls. It's not that kind of like old school, like high school rugby coach kind of thing. It's or high school football coach, I should say. It genuinely is, bar move fast is good. Bar move slow is not good, And if you even have to think about the barbell moving slow, if you're like, was that kind of slow? Then it's probably too slow. And I bet you those metrics you get from your velocity meter would line up quite well with that. However, having a nice readout would be, but they're so expensive right now that I just don't know.
No, they're so expensive.
They're like a couple €100 or whatever, If they were like 50 odd quid, I think it'd be interesting to see. I'd probably buy one for weightlifting and have a record of it. But
I think you'll see an app-based solution very, very soon.
As in a recording one?
Yeah, recording one where they'll track bar velocity just on your phone, and it'll actually be reliable bar velocity.
You just have to tape your phone to the plate, is it?
Get your power outputs from that,
Yeah.
Okay, Tim Champion, for the last question for me anyway. For a jumpy athlete, how many weeks would you run a power block for before switching to another block, just measuring vertical jump till gains drop off? Power blocks really, for me, right, and dealing with my athletes, power blocks really depend on the season you're in and the length of your season. Tim, I know you're basically a professional parkour or free running athlete, right? So your season runs all year round every year. I would kind of block it out a small bit more than that and look at a bit broader. Do you need to make changes in body size or shape? Do you need to make changes in general strength, or do you need to make changes in power output? So for a lot of your stuff as a jumping athlete, a bounding athlete, you're going to see power being one of the main things you want to drive up, but you might have some things like, okay, I want to gain or drop a small bit of weight now. Take your 2 months for that. Then after that, do a small bit of a strength cycle. For you, I probably wouldn't go over 8 to 12 weeks on a strength cycle. And then I'd spend as much time as possible in those power blocks. So probably if you're dealing with 2 periods of off season a year, that will give you probably a third of your time or maybe half of your season in total in a power block. Certainly if you're in a power block and I know there's a second part to your question a bit further down where you're saying, how do you go about progressing power work? If you're in a power block and you see your vertical gains or your vertical jump gains dropping off, you need to change something immediately. Power blocks, you want to be fairly peaked throughout. Power blocks will essentially be a taper from your strength work. So your second piece of the question is, how do you go about progressing power work? For example, it's recommended to squat 60% of 1RM. For 1 or 3 reps, increasing the weight reduces power output, and pushing reps is not power work. So what you need to do for your power work is you need to think about, there's an ideal power output bracket for people, right? You can do this test very, very simply. It will take 1 session to do it. If you know your squat 1RM, you just put a dynamometer onto the bar, a linear transducer onto the bar. You'll measure power output as an effect of weight versus speed. Find that ideal bracket for you. It will probably be more towards 60% than it will towards 80%. For us, it will be more towards 80% than it will be for 60% because we're more strength orientated. If you've done that test and you found 60% of 1RM to be your ideal power output, what I would like to see is I'd like to see the actual number for speed increasing from week to week. So say if you do 2 of these power squat sessions a week and you're doing 6 sets of 3 reps where power is the main thing you're looking at, take an average number of those 6 sets and you'll say, okay, my speed, like you can just use speed here. The weight remains constant. So the power is mainly reflective of the speed the bar is moving at. say, okay, my average bar speed is 1.5 meters per second. What you'd be looking for is over the course of your month or 8 weeks or 12 weeks of your power phase, that average of your 6 sets of 3 will be going from 1.5 meters per second to 1.7 meters per second at the end of it. That's where you're looking to progress here. You'll increase your power output. I don't necessarily want you to add weight to the bar, although what might happen is after 6 weeks at 120 kilos, your speed keeps moving up. Okay, you're progressing well. That's increase starts to slow down. You'll plateau for a period of time. Then what I would do is I would alter the weight, maybe check your 1RM again, and then go again at that power output or relative power output, and just keep pushing the speed on all those reps.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for tuning in.
Thanks for watching.
We'll
Thanks for asking
be
questions.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We'll be here again next week. Thank God, hopefully, unless something drastic happens. We'll talk to you all again soon.